All right, Chapter 2. Y'all should have already read it because you're doing task 1, 2, and 3 were due Saturday, right?
Yes.
And then we're going to talk about Chapter 3, which is cover your next 4 tasks. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the references because several groups of, all 3 groups have issues with references and how you correctly cite what I'm looking for. Okay. I don't want to have to ding y'all the 15 points for failure to do citations. And I'll explain why they're there and why it happened. Okay. None of you plagiarized, but I have to be equitable to all students and make sure you understand you can't do it that way. And I'll explain why so that you have your understanding of it. Okay. We talked about the information system categorization, the sensitivity of the system. There are 2 different types. You have a data and you have a system, right? The system itself is the hardware component. Your data is going to be your software issues, okay? Like your actual core data. Your system is the hardware and the software components, like the operating systems, things of that nature. I want to pull that classification difference there. Sensitivity assessment process. Y'all went through. Y'all did your CIA triad, right? Confidentiality is the sensitivity of the data must be assessed based on its need for protection against disclosure. What was y'all's idea or thought process into how y'all correlated your confidentiality area? What'd y'all think? How many of you thought it was low? How many of you thought it was medium? Raise your hands high so I can see. And how many of you thought it was high? Okay. The sensitivity of the data must be assessed based on its need for protection against disclosure. Randy, why did your group think it was high?
Well, we thought everything was high just because it was an Air Force base. Everything that goes in and out of the government establishment should probably be checked. In those 3 categories.
Not necessarily. And the reason being is we have classified and unclassified systems in the federal government. Okay, unclassified systems, my local desktop, I could access Google. Okay, that's free, basically free traversal nature. Now there are some sensitivity of the, and that would have been a low, right? My desktop is low because who cares about my physical desktop? What are you going to get off of my physical desktop? Maybe a couple files. You're not going to get a big picture. Okay. The system itself, a lot of you, like Kelly's group and Cameron's group, both came up with the idea that it was medium. Kelly, why don't y'all think it was medium?
Because a lot of the system isn't necessarily going to, it's not going to be traumatic if the system goes down. It's not like system goes down and the whole base goes down.
Correct.
System goes down, well, we need to get it up within the next couple of days.
Right. The SIP system, all it does is a database that houses and gives you pinpoint accuracy to GPS within a meter. That's how far the GPS goes down on this one. Classified system goes down to an inch. But to a meter of a specific communications line or piece of equipment anywhere in the Air Force infrastructure and the AOR and some Department of Defense at the Pentagon. Okay? So that's why it is a medium class system. Okay, and I didn't count points off for y'all getting the wrong categorization. I just want to know why y'all are thinking the way y'all are. Integrity. Again, you said it was a high, right? Why did you think it was high integrity, Josh?
Well, in the descriptions of like moderate and high, it's kind of like when you're hashing. That one little difference could affect everything, and so we decided it should be high because depending on what kind of information you're dealing with, if you're dealing with false information, it could affect multiple areas on the base, not just including your own.
Okay. Cameron, why did y'all think it was medium? Y'all had high as well? Kelly, what did y'all come up with for integrity? Anyone in your group, it doesn't matter. Matthew, why did y'all come up with medium? Did y'all come up with medium for integrity?
Yes, a medium, because the integrity of the data is only certain people will be able to access it, so therefore it is going to be high. But it doesn't
And you adjusted that based on the availability score that you gave it, correct? Is that what you're I'm understanding you to say? Because the availability, only certain people had access to it, so you weren't as worried about the integrity of the data. To me, it's a medium high. And the reason being is it is critical for that function of that system, but not for the function of the Air Force as a whole. Does that make sense? you always want to make sure that your data integrity is intact at the
But
core.
We're also thinking these are military people. They're not going to be,
There are contractors that have access to the system as well.
but they're doing it under military supervision.
Some, yes. Yeah, should be.
Kind of, sort of. So they're not
They're not misguided people, is what you're
well,
trying.
yeah, they're not misguided users. And so the integrity of the data going in is going to be at a higher quality in the first place than you would find in a lot of public businesses.
Okay, I see where y'all are coming up with that. Okay, and that does tie into availability. The data must be protected from adverse consequences or denial for its use or destruction. What that basically means is the data available when it needs to be? And all of y'all got that basically right. It's really a medium to a high. The biggest thing is the confidentiality level, okay? And that's what changed your system for y'all's group to being a complete high because everything was high, right? Kelly, y'all had a mix, and y'all were all medium. So,
I think we were all medium.
oh, you were all medium. They were the ones that had the mix. Okay.
Well, my only argument is each one of those. Why not just shoot for high, no matter what? Just because it doesn't take much more resources, from my personal experience working where I do, to actually get it up to a high as opposed to putting it at a medium.
Right, but the task for this was to look at the system and say, does it really need to be a high?
But if it doesn't take too much to make it a high.
And that's specifically like to your group.
Well, I know you didn't cut off where I'm just saying that's what I think is why not shoot for high. If I'm going to do anything for anybody, I'm going to shoot for high.
You want that network security to be as tight as you possibly can. Now,
Yes.
the only problem that you're going to run into, and I agree, I like to see network security being high across the board. However, it's where does the cost benefit come into play? And that's what's going to get you in a lot of businesses. Just telling you, I mean, mom and pop shop, do I care about their network security being a high? Absolutely not, because they're not going to go get a TAC in to talk to Cox Cable, because Cox isn't going to put one on their side. Okay,
Probably
a TAC
wouldn't
X.
go through the strenuous process
Hey.
to do it for mom and pop, you know what
They may. You never know.
I mean? Me personally, I'm just saying.
Oh,
Like, if I'm
I
gonna go
agree.
through all this trouble, they're all going to be high. There's no question.
Okay.
Because I had to go through all this trouble.
And that you did your system as a high, you'll understand when we start talking about these task 1 or 2.1 and 2.2 where it comes into play. Okay. Data sensitivity assessment, or I'm sorry, you have different classification approaches. You have a public system. Okay, the mom and pop, what information can be disseminated to the public, what needs to be internal, so anyone inside the organization can have it, and then restricted, right? What level of availability of that data is there? To who? So, this is also what we call the need to know approach. If you don't need to know it, you don't have access to it. Okay? Data sensitivity assessments. You have the low, medium, and high, and you have the CIA across, right? So here it gives you an idea. For example, a high confidentiality level. The consequences of unauthorized disclosure or compromise to data information on system is unacceptable. Loss could be expected to affect national level interest adversely. Does that make sense now? That's why I was saying it's more of a medium, where it's more the agency level information that will be affected. So think of it as, how many of y'all are familiar with the tactical, strategic, and operational level scopes? Y'all have heard of those names? Tactical. That is what you're getting your hands on. Those are going to be your technicians. Then you have the operational level. That's your agency. That's where you work at. Strategic, that is that 30,000 foot view that comes across the entire plane. Okay? You can go ahead and pull a chair up from the back and put there with your group. For any system that is a high, like Brandon's group, you'd actually have to go under NICAP standards. Why? Because they're stricter than what the NIST standards are. Okay? Now we talked about data sensitivity, let's talk about criticality. It's similar, yet different. And it is to determine the nature and type of controls that you will be using for your system. Okay? Now, we talked about your system. Y'all all rated as high, 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 so you're obviously going to be a high system, correct? Kelly, y'all all did straight moderates, right? So you're going to be straight moderates. Y'all had one high and two moderates. So y'all.
We have one of them.
Oh, you have one each, so you're going to basically be a moderate. Now, when we get to looking at the controls here today, and I bring up the document, and I'll explain how things are supposed to be on the 2.1 and 2.2. Because trust me, you don't want to mess these up. The criticality assessment. Is it mission critical or is it non-mission critical? Mission critical. Is it a system that you have to have up and running? In other words, 5.9 reliability, 3.9 reliability, or 2.9 reliability. Does that make sense? How much time, if it's a mission critical, it's going to be classified or a national security system. It will process information under a classified or executive order or act of Congress, things of that high level. Basically, it's a classified system in a nutshell. Okay, that's mission critical. It can impact certain missions of that agency that are functioning. Then you have the mission non-critical, which could be a failure, but who cares? All right. How do you rank it? Well, dollar loss, right? Everyone's always, that bottom line is what gets all the companies. The operational importance of the system. So is SIPs that vital to the Air Force? What would you say? Yes? No? How many say yes, that it's absolutely vital to the Air Force? How many of you say it's not vital to the Air Force? How many of you say it's somewhat? Okay, the answer is it is somewhat. That's why it is a mission. It's valued as a mission critical system because of the data that it has in it. However, it's not national security mission critical. That would be our classified system, which can give operational impact information that can impact a mission. If my classified system was not up and running, I would not be able to let the people in the AOR know that this port on this switch, if you take it down, you shut down Nellis Air Force Base and the UAV that's going to do a strike. Would that information come in pretty handy? So, and then finally the breadth and scope of it. How big is this system? What is its purpose? And then also is there health, life, or safety considerations that must be met? In other words, if this system goes down, could it cause someone's life? The answer for SIPs, no. If that system goes down, it's not going to cause anyone life. It'll cause them a lot of headaches, but it won't cause them their life. So task 1.1, you identify the system owner and categorize the information system as records. What you're doing is 800-16, 800-59 gave you the instructions on how to classify the system and give me the information for identifying the system, right? In this, you gave a system description, you gave a name, you gave me points of contact, and then you defined it as critical. Is it mission critical, non-mission critical? Is it high, medium, low? What were the levels of the CIA, right? For task 1.1. Task 1.2, you went a little bit more in depth, giving me basically you started your security plan by telling me what types of systems there, what software is there, how, what kind of security our devices are in place to evaluate this system. And the start of an overall security plan. Does that make sense? That's what the purpose of task 1.2 is. This is going to go very hand in hand with task 2.4. What you're basing on here. Task 1.3, basically you're registering the system with me saying, is the DAA, here's my system that I'm going to be certifying and accrediting, here's the name of it, here's some information that you need to know about it. That's basically what task 1.3 was. Right? Y'all remember that? That was due this past Saturday? Everyone have any questions on task 1.1, 1.2, 1.3? None? It was pretty straightforward, right? And I try to make these tasks as straightforward as possible. Now let's talk about the next chapter. Okay. In chapter 3, we're talking about security controls. What is a security control? Well, basically, it's a categorization that asks specific questions like, are all the fire extinguishers in this building up to date. People don't think that, oh my goodness, a fire extinguisher, what does that got to do with security, right? Well, what happens if Kelly can tell you, for example, what happens if the roof of your IT lab catches on fire? Now does it come into play to protect your system? A fire extinguisher that was within date, that was the right dry chem or ABC to put out that fire, would have come into to help the situation, right? So yes, sprinklers in the server room, not a good idea. Okay, like those that have been on my security audits have found out. There are 3 different levels of sensitivity of controls. You have a high, medium, and a low. Low just means basically I can look at the system, it'll protect me against malicious code, and I have automatic updates, okay? Pretty basic, low-level, interim, or junior level technician kind of stuff. Moderate security. Not only do I have that, but then I add in the organization essentially manages virus protection and it takes a more active approach. Then my high level, which is what Brandon really likes, is not only do we protect it from that and we do automatic updates and manage it, the information system automatically updates it by itself. So we're not waiting on a human interaction, it will automatically do it itself. Does that make the difference? Or just let you see? Number 1, yeah, I have antivirus out there, but I don't really care. Number 2, I have antivirus, I don't care, but my IT manager uploads antiviruses on whenever he feels like it. And a critical system is the system updates itself as soon as that patch comes out. So that kind of gives you the broad scope there. Selecting baseline controls. There are 17 different families, and there's over 200 of different types of controls. 800-53 is the ones that are generally accepted. Okay. Now, as a general accepted, minimum security baseline should be modified to incorporate your business needs. In other words, since this is a military system, there are going to be tighter controls than there are going to be for the NIST standards. Okay, they have their own process and risk management framework, which we're talking about now, but they're applying a different set of controls called DICAP. But we'll get to that. They include incorporation of controls mandated by law or regulatory compliance, such as the HIPAA, the GLBA, SOX, all that kind of stuff. Okay. The use of as long as you have a good set of controls at each level, your common core controls, like we talked about, you have a commonality of those 30 controls that you're required to do in Task 2.1, was to list me 30 common controls. A common control is defined as one that will be on low, medium, and high straight across the board. That is a common control. So long as when you look at the control and out to the right, under low you see its name, under medium and high you see its name, straight across like AC1. When we get it, I'll bring it up here in a minute so you can kind of see what needs to be done. When doing a minimum security baseline, it's important to use the baseline set in its entirety to record the entire compliance of the system, not just individual components. Because if you leave components out, what's going to happen? I'm thinking you're skipping out on me and I will give you a DATO.
Do they have to be prioritized?
No. You can just list them like AC1 if that's one of your controls, and just list them all the way down. Because you're going to be asking these questions hypothetically to the system. Does that make sense? As we go along. When we get into 3 and 4. Test 3s and 4s. Elimination of entire section, not because it's not applicable to the system, raises red flags. You don't eliminate it. You answer the control saying this is non-applicable. Don't just not answer the question. Be like me saying, Thomas, why didn't you wear a blue shirt? And he not answer me. Or blue shirts are required today. And no one answers me. I guess I am wearing a blue shirt. Does that really make sense, right? If he said, I didn't wear it because today at work I was required to wear a white shirt. Okay, now we have an answer to it. Or because it does not apply to me because you can't tell me to wear a blue shirt because you don't have that authority. Okay, that's another answer. Or you can say, I don't really care, not applicable, because it doesn't apply to this information system, right? So that, you're going to have some questions that are in subparagraphs that may or may not apply to the system, like it says, my interconnected device must be at a minimum the same accreditation requirement level as what my current system is. Well, if your system isn't accredited, does that interconnection need to be accredited? At that point, the answer is not applicable because you don't care about an interconnection because your system is not certified. To certify your system, you have to have them be on the same level as you. So you have to tell them to go through their process. And if they say, well, we're a medium and you're a low, guess what? You're great. If you're medium, great. But if you're high and they're medium, it's not good. They have to be up to a high. Does that make sense? Assessing risk. You need to look at the background of the system. Are there any automated tools that can that have been going out and doing things? Like I have SCAP. SCAP is a tool that the Department of Defense uses to go and test automatically each one of the controls that are in NIST. For one system, running these controls comprises of a lot of different things. Remind me and I'll bring up a sample report from one of my security audits to show you how lax this company is. Scalability. Is the system scalable? All right. Does it match the Common Core terminology? And then a risk assessment and system authorization. When we assess the risk of the system, do we include it into our system authorization package? The answer is yes. Now you're going to be doing that a little bit of a risk assessment a little bit later on. Okay, risk assessment process. Number one, you've got to define your system categorization. Have you already done so? Yes. Have you identified threats to the system? What types of threats? Yeah. You might have. You may have talked about them. Vulnerability identification. You haven't gotten to this yet. Okay, when you're scanning a system for a risk, you need to find out what threats may occur. In Oklahoma, what are some of the big threats that we have? Tornadoes, okay? What happens if F5 comes in and rips up my server room? I better have an offsite, right? So how would I mitigate that threat? By having an offsite backup within greater than 20-mile distance away from where I'm at. Because the odds are you're not going to have that supercell that's not going to be 20 miles wide with a tornado that's 20 miles wide, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest tornado ever on record was 2.6, and that was last year in El Reno. So that's why you don't want to keep it within 2.5 miles now, right? Systems are getting bigger and further apart. Hey, let's put our backup date in Salt Lake City and in New York City, you know?
Have it directly north, south, east, or west.
We're not News 9 here, right? Control analysis. The fourth step of the risk assessment is to analyze the current system's protective controls and any planned controls that you have and what information is applied to them or allocated to them as far as resources. Okay? You need to make sure that those controls are done. Likelihood determination. Now this is what's going to get you. How likely are these events to occur? Okay? Now you as your group are going to have to come up with an idea of how likely certain events are going to occur. So we all defined one right now, tornadoes, right? What about earthquakes? Can an earthquake take us down?
Getting more and more likely.
What about a flood?
Yeah.
There's
different kinds of floods. You can have a pipe burst in the ceiling.
Trust me, I know that because it took one of our systems down. That's why I'm mentioning it. So you identify your threats, then you say how likely are they occur to your system. Okay, that gives you some sort of level of risk idea. Then the impact analysis. If this event,
That's a printer.
that is the weirdest sound up here with this going on. I'm like, what in the world? Impact analysis. If this event was to occur, what type of impact would it have on the system? The sprinkler head busts over the server cabinet. What kind of impact is that going to have on my system? Pretty high impact, right? So then you're going to come up with a risk determination. Now, you're all seeing in the content area I have that risk determination matrix. You have your categorization of your system, and you also have the likelihood. Okay? While we're talking about in this process, that's where you can come up with your risk level, and it's going to tell you whether you're catastrophic all the way down to low. Don't be in catastrophic and don't be in low. Low means you didn't give it any thought. Catastrophic means your system failed. Okay? Control recommendations. You've done something with a control, you've applied it, now you're going to, and it failed, you're going to give you a recommendation on how you're going to fix it so they can proceed on. And this is what we're going to call the POAM. It's a plan of actions and milestones. You're going to get very used to that terminology because you're going to have to take, out of the 50 controls that you do, 10 are going to fail. So you're going to choose 10 of them that you have to do a POAM against, and that's what we're working on step 8 here. So y'all kind of see how this process is going to start occurring. And then step 9, the results documentation. This is where we call the accreditation package. You put all these results together. You're telling me how you scanned your system. Here's our level of risk. We had 10 controls fail. Here's what we're going to do to mitigate those. The timeline, who's responsible for them. You're sending this in all your documentation up to me to look at to see if I accept this risk for my network. That's what the results documentation is going to allow you to do. I already talked a little bit about the risk matrix. You're going to identify the threats, the vulnerabilities, the harm, and the likelihood. And just follow the little risk matrix sheet that I have on there for you, and you'll be okay. And I'll explain the P value here in just a minute. Okay? Security plans. They must be applicable to the system. Don't write a security plan that is not applicable to the system. Why? Does you no good. It's a paperweight. You're killing trees for nothing. And no, I'm not an eco person. Responsibility. You need to define who does what. And the system owner defines who is in charge of what section. For the security plan, the system owner is the one that is responsible for all this accreditation and risk management plan. Okay? Plan contents. It's going to have the description of which controls you're using. The roles and the responsibilities, who has what and who's doing what. Security-related business drivers. Is there a specific function that's making the system have to be in place? Information categories, interconnectivity, system certification level. Right? This is your group. You're going to have high, right? And both the other two are going to have medium. So that's going to be your system certification level. So all your documentation has to be on that high level. Rules of behavior. And by the way, there's not going to be any right or wrong on this. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at you understanding the process. Yes, I want you to think critically. If you say it's a high system, well then make it a high system. If it's going to be a medium system, make it a medium system. Plan development information. You're going to tell me if something's failing, what you're going to do to future developments, how are you going to fix and modify things that need to be done. Okay? What is a security plan not? One of the most misconceptions relating to security plans is they are meant to serve as the repository for all security-related information of a system. That is not a security plan. That's a detailed breakdown of your system. And here are the steps that you're going to do. You're going to initiate a plan, get all the information from the sources that you need to. You're going to use those development tools, templates. How many of y'all have gone to SAN's website and looked at their security template designs? Okay, each of them are subsections. They're not in one big document, are they? How many of y'all had me for ISA or when I made y'all do that? 2 of you, 3 of you, a couple of you. It gave you a good picture of what you needed to do, right? And they were not a big document, were they? Single page stuff. Plan format. Get the plan in a certain format. Get the approval from me. And then you're going to maintain this plan. Keep it up to date. If you add another server, you need to talk about that other server and change all your documentation to reflect that. Plan security. Where are you storing this plan? Do what? You want to store it in a fireproof safe because you want people not to be able to get to it, but you also want to protect it from a fire too. And resist it. Do what?
Would you want it off-site?
You can do it off-site. Store it on Google Drive.
You're allowed to have like copies of it though on site and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need a physical copy on site. Resistance is security planning. I guarantee you, I don't care what company you work for, you are going to get resistance to security plans. I don't have time to read it. I don't care about it. We don't need to focus on it. Something will never happen to us. 2 months later, boom. We shouldn't have done it. Why didn't you do it? Well, you told me not to. That's not an excuse. You're supposed to do it anyway. Trust me, it happens. Okay, the second step of risk management framework results in the identification of initial set of those control baselines, right? The control set. We have on the control set I know I'm breaking every rule. Y'all saw that, didn't you? It saved it for me. Let's go over here. Let's go to regulations. Let's open this baby up. And as you know, it's going to take forever. Okay. Well, let's talk about task 2.2. Here's what I would highly recommend. Those first 30 controls that are common, they're going to identify each system straight across, okay? So it can be used on all systems. Now, some of those may have subcontrols that are, if you get to moderate level or you get to the high level, okay? That you need to do everything. If you're in high, you got to do everything that's in the 2 lower levels. If you're in moderate, you got to do everything in that level and the low level, okay? You already have 30. Just add 20 more that would make to that system. I guarantee you there are 100 plus common controls. And you can go ahead and do that. All right? Just go through and use 50 of your common controls to answer your questions. Does that make sense? For the 50 that you're going to use. Pick some from each group. I don't want one group left out because why? Then you're not focusing on it and it raises a red flag. And what I tell you I do when it raises a red flag, you get a DATO. Task 2.3. Continuing monitoring strategy will be developed for each information system to allow the determination of the effectiveness of security controls over time as well as the impact of any proposed or actual changes to the system. How are you going to continue to monitor this system? What kind of things do you monitor? Are you thinking about the physical and the software and the hardware? Are you talking about logical stuff? Are you talking about logs, event viewer kind of stuff? How are you going to monitor this system? What processes are you going to do? And I didn't put 2.4 on there. What's 2.4?
Approved security plan.
Okay, an approved security plan?
Approved.
Oh, approve a security plan. Once you get all that documentation, you submit 2.4, I can then approve your security plan for you to go forward. Does that make sense? Basically, it's a collection of everything you've already done in the previous one. So now, since we've talked about the 2 chapters, let's go down here. Okay. That's media protection.
2.4 talks about system controls for like management controls, operational controls, technical controls, identification and authentication.
Right. Okay. What we have here is our control levels, okay? And notice we have priority code 1, priority code 2, and priority code 3. Depending on the ones you choose, you're going to have an easy little formula to remember. I said you can have P1s, P2s, and P3s. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at this. Let's say you chose AC2 that fails on your system. That is a P1. That's 3 points. 2 points, 1 point. Okay? Out of those 10 controls, you're going to add them all up. So let's just say all of these right here, down to here fail. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 P1s, which is what, 21 points? I have a P2, which is 2 points. And let's scroll down just a little bit more.
What page do you want?
On the I just scrolling down in it. I didn't download it, so I can't tell you. It's probably around 115, I believe. 100 to 115. So we've got, let's do P3, P3. That's 2 P3s, or 3 P3s, and then a P2. So I now have 4 points. So I had 1, 2, 3 P3s. So I've got 21, 24, 28 points. Does that make sense? So that when you, here's where you're going to get your priority controls in this column. When you get to the risk matrix. And I'll bring that up in just a second, and I'll show you how we come up with that. Now, for account management, AC2, for the groups that are going to use AC2 as a common control, why? Because AC2 is in all 3 areas, right? Moderate, you also have subparagraph 1, subparagraph 2, 3, and 4. You also have to answer those on top of AC2. High, you got to do 1 through 5, 11, 12, and 13. Okay.
Answer them as in.
And I'll show you here in just a second. I'm just giving it as an example. A common control is one that where you have like AC30 straight across. It doesn't matter whether your system is a low, medium, or high. AC3 is applicable to it. Does that make sense now? Kelly's group, y'all see that? Understand it? AC3 is straight across, right? Low system, moderate system, and high system. That is a common control. AC4 is not. Why? Because it is not applicable to lows. It is only for a medium or a high system. Does that make sense? So common control, so long as there's 3 straight across, you're good. Now, least privilege is always a fun one. Now let's scroll down here. Like for example, let me get up here to AC2. It's AC3. Okay. I'm just going to download this real quick. It's a lot easier to see it. Come on. I'm going to give it a minute so I can load up these. Not even down to that far yet. Okay, there's the security control structure. All right. Gotta love it when you're still scrolling down while it's loading. Okay. Like I said, this is a lot easier to see. You got SC1 straight across, right? So system communication protection policy and measures is a common control. This is basically saying the exact same thing. And here is the title to the subparagraph of AC18 or AC16. I'm sorry. Come on. Okay. This is just explaining how some of these are going to come off. Okay. Let's get down to the catalog. Okay. AC1. Now notice you're going to have to move this off. But you need to copy everything from here up for AC1 for your 50 controls. So if you said AC1 was your control, then do this. Now, when you have like, does AC2 have subparagraphs? Okay, right here. You also have to do these enhancements and answer. Here's the guidance for this particular part of that enhancement. Does that make sense? So, if you're a moderate, you only have to choose these subcategories to depend on whatever it is. So was it like 1 through 5 or something for AC2 for moderate? You just go basically from here up, copy AC2, and paste it into your document to define it. And if you're 3,
13
you know, you'll add 11, 12, and 13 to it. So why is 6, 7, or 6 to 9, or 6 to 10 not worried about it? Well, let's look at them. 6, dynamic privilege management. You can read it. Role-based schemes. They may not be applicable to that categorization. Okay, it's there for you to peruse if you want, but you don't have to add that into your control. Does that make sense? So it's all down here in the bottom of this document. I made it in a Word document so you can copy and paste it. Yeah. So, is there any questions on how this goes? Y'all understand
How
that?
do we cite that?
I'm not going to worry about you copying this directly because I know exactly where you got it from. That's the only citation that I'm not going to have you cite because you'll be citing forever and a day. Or just do it this way. At the top, say all these controls were taken from NIST SP 800-53 revision 4. Yes.
On the reference section,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of times in the reference section, is that,
That's up top.
does it count, it doesn't really count as a site either, does it?
What do you mean?
Well, because under, like when you get towards the bottom of that, it'll say reference, control, whatever, whatever. Yeah, so that one says reference none, but some of them actually have like
Okay.
a long list of references.
All that's saying is those controls specific, or the subcontrols or control itself is specific. You can find these in these specific documents.
Okay.
That's where this creation of this control came from.
Okay.
That's basically the background or the history of that specific control. Okay, now that we have that, and y'all understand where those are coming from, right?
Tell us how to fail.
Do what?
I mean, you're going to tell us how to have like things fail now, right?
You're just going to say that this control failed, this control failed, this control failed.
And then how we fixed it.
And then you're going to tell me how you're going to fix or remediate that control.
Okay.
So let's go over here to group project documents. Here's the risk management matrix template. It's easier to see it when I download it. Just so that when you get to it, you'll understand it. Come on. Okay. In this instance, I just did 3, 2, and 1, but it's actually, these numbers should be reversed. No. A P1 is the highest level, right? Priority 1. That's priority 1 fix. So what you're going to see is I said it's 5, 3, and 1. So let's fix this number here. 5, 3, 1. There were 2 of these, 3 of these. If I had 21, there was 7 of these. So now I have what? 35, and then 6 and 3, right? So it's 41, 42, 43, 44 points for those 10 controls that failed. Well, 44 points makes it a critical categorization for the risk impact. Okay? So I'm looking in this column right here. Guaranteed, right? Because that's my critical. Now, what is the likelihood of each one of these what was I trying to do? Okay, of those 10 controls, let's say I have 3 are certain, 2 are likely, 1 is possible, and 1 is unlikely. Does that make sense? So I have 3 times 5 is 15, right? Then I have 8, and I have a 3 and a 2. So I've got 18, so I have a 28 for that section of those 7 controls. Now let's just say I have a 3 and a 3, and a 3 and a 3, and a 3, just to make it easy. So it's 9, 15 more points. 28 plus 15 is what, 43? So look for 43. It's likely that it's going to occur. I will come down here. If I'm likely and critical, my system level is a what? High. I have a high-risk system. Do you want a high-risk system? Your goal is to be in low or moderate. Do not be very low and do not be extreme. Very low means that you're falsifying government documents. Okay? Because guarantee you every system is going to be at least a low. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. You're going to base these on the 10 controls that failed. Does that make sense now? So, I'm certain that this control will cause, there's a certain chance that something is going to happen to my system because this control failed. There's a likely for that P1 failure. Does that make sense now? And then you do that for each one of them, get that. So when you're doing your multiplication up here, do the same thing for here. And I may just go ahead and create a spreadsheet for you that will automatically do it. You just tell me, do a drop down, and it'll give me the points of what it is. You just put in the name of it, P1, and how likely the system is, and it'll give you your 2 points, and it can automatically fix your risk management. Would that be a little easier for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Y'all are out there daydreaming on me. So is there any other questions? Y'all kind of understand where we're headed now?
Do we need to put in the related controls underneath the
No.
supplemental guidance, to show you
Where that gray box is, don't worry about it. All I'm looking for is that specific, if you have that 1 in parentheses, I need that paragraph that has 1.
Yeah.
Any of the other ones that do not pertain to that your level of classification of your system in that specific control, I do not want the information.
What about, so what is the supplemental guidance?
That's what's below. That's the paragraphs.
Right, but what is it?
It tells you what that control is about and what it should do. And if it has a reference on there, you can go look at, let's say it says it's pointing to 800-42 revision 2. I'm making up one. I don't know off the top of my head. You're going to go over there. You can look it up and it'll tell you where that control is. Does that make sense? Or where that control is based off of?
How do we determine which ones are certain and likely and unlikely?
That's going to be up to your interpretation. So,
When we pick 10 of them that have failed, we just say these are certain, these are likely, these are
right, you're going to go say, think of it as a hacker. How certain are you that if this vulnerability is to occur in your system, is it going to be certain, or is it going to be rare, unlikely, possible, likely, or certain that an attack can occur and take down your network by that one control? So you're looking specific at that control. If it says, my network connection IDS is broken, could they, it's possible they could get into the system without being detected. Is it certain they're going to get in the system without being detected? Probably not. Just apply common sense as to, if this control is to fail and it opens up something in my system, what is the likelihood that an attack will occur through that port, or that
I'm
vulnerability?
just a little confused because if we're picking 10 that are going to be failing, then they're certain to have failed.
No, they're not. Don't think of it as certain to fail. Think of it as, if they did fail,
Right.
what is the likelihood that an attacker will use that to exploit it?
So basically, aren't we picking 10 that the system we're checking is really just weak? Not that whether they're
right, when you choose out of their 50 controls, you choose 10 that fail. You're only going to apply this to those 10 because the rest of your system is tight and secure. So it's not going to affect your risk. Your risk is of my vulnerabilities. How open am I to these type of attacks? What exactly, and how likely is this type of attack to occur? Let's say I have a P1 where I did not do a system update on my Windows server ever. Okay, what is the likelihood that someone is going to be able to exploit that vulnerability in my system? Pretty certain, okay? Especially if it's been out there for years. Now, if I've updated all my systems and I have not updated the most recent update, now what is the likelihood? I would say unlikely. Because a lot of users haven't had that, or hackers haven't really exploited that yet. Does that make sense now? You got to think of it as a whole picture and say, all right, if I'm a hacker and this system has this vulnerability, what is the likelihood that I can exploit it? Just think of it in that way. Because you're looking at each one of these controls as an exploit. Because that's exactly what it is. That's a vulnerability that you're going to exploit. Is there any other questions? No questions? All righty then.